time now for Perspective, and today's guest has just the right expertise to discuss Britain's leadership crisis. Stefan Stern is a political commentator for The Guardian and The Financial Times. He's also the author of 2 books on leadership and management. He joins us by Skype from London. Mr. Stern, thank you so much for speaking with us. I imagine you were not surprised by Liz Truss's resignation. Just a week before, you'd written that she was a case study in leadership failure. Where exactly did she go wrong?
Well, the list of where she went right would be a shorter one. She won this election through a legitimate process. She then tried to move very, very quickly. She ignored all the advice from experts about how the financial markets would react to some of her proposals. She seemed to find it very difficult to take that advice. She ignored it. She pressed on. We saw what happened in the financial markets with consequences for other countries around the world, of course, other players in Europe and beyond. And the numbers just proved too difficult. She lost her credibility. The party immediately lost faith in her, and she was out yesterday.
But it hasn't been just Liz Truss, has it? I mean, she was Britain's 4th Conservative PM in 6 years. So does the Tory party have a broader problem here?
Yes, and I think perhaps even British politics, and perhaps we have to say English politics, has a problem here. And of course, we are still in the post-Brexit environment, or the emerging post-Brexit environment. That's 6 years ago that we've been going on about this process. It's still not really a settled matter. The identity of this new emerging Britain, where we sit in the world, and this bothers the Conservative Party most of all. And there's a real tension there between those who would be more pragmatic and those who still want some sort of purist, idealist outcome from Brexit. And that's really underlying a lot of these tensions.
And is there maybe a problem with the system as well, that it's perhaps set up to put the wrong people in power? Because the group that chooses the Tory party leader makes up less than 1% of the UK's population.
That's right. It's a membership. Don't want to be rude, but the average age, in the perhaps late 50s, early 60s, with certain part of society with a rather narrow outlook on the world, arguably. Yes, and the discussion today in London in the Conservative parties, perhaps how to avoid going back to the membership of the party, and perhaps it could be settled in Westminster. Perhaps one candidate could emerge through this coming weekend and on Monday, so it won't be necessary to put a vote back to this interesting and perhaps somewhat eccentric membership base.
And what do you think needs to happen next? Should they name a leader as quickly as they can on Monday, or does the UK actually just need to see a general election, as the opposition parties are calling for?
They certainly should. The Conservatives certainly should move quickly and preferably without any delay and without going to their members and pick someone on Monday. But yes, absolutely. I think fundamentally the moment has come for a general election. It's not always a welcome suggestion, but it seems that the sentiment in the UK is very much that this is a moment where the elastic has been stretched too far, as we say, and the popular will needs to be tested. Do they really want this Conservative Party to remain in office, if not in power, for the next 2 years? Because we are not due an election till perhaps 2024, even early 2025. That might be too long for this sort of chaos and confusion to continue.
And if they name a leader on Monday and that person takes over, how likely is it that we would get that election before those 2 years are up?
It is very unlikely because of self-interest of the Conservative Party. The opinion polls suggest that they are massively behind. If there were an election today, there would be an absolute catastrophe for them. And so I think the moral case will probably fall on deaf ears at the top of the Conservative Party, unless it can be shown through opinion polling, through popular sentiment, perhaps through media campaigns, through popular campaigns, which I think we could not rule out, marches on Westminster and so on and around the country, the people calling for a general election. That may have some impact, but in fact, in our system, the Prime Minister, whoever he or she is, would not have to call an election for another 2 years.
And I have to ask the big question, who should replace Liz Truss?
Well, should or will is a different question. And you'll have seen the speculation about Boris Johnson. This does tell you something about the ultra-pragmatism of many people in the Conservative Party and the willingness to overlook or forget, perhaps temporarily, other sort of moral or ethical concerns. As you know, there's still an investigation into Mr. Johnson in Parliament about whether he lied or not, whether he corrected false statements when he should have. But I think Mr. Sunak is still the most likely one, but it's early on Friday. Anything can happen till Monday.
And if you could pick from any politician in the UK of any party, or even beyond the world of politics, just anyone in the UK who would be a good leader, who would it be? Who has what it takes?
Well, you're inviting a political judgment. The opinion polling puts the Labour Party currently at around 50% of popular support. And so the leader of the opposition, as he's called, Sir Keir Starmer, seems on the face of it to be a popular choice for many. He's a capable person. He's a serious person. He doesn't have the charisma or sort of exoticism of some of the other candidates on offer, but he seems pretty competent. And it might be that a bit of traditional British sobriety and competence, which is what we're supposed to be famous for in these things, might be welcome. Might be what people want after all this noise and brouhaha of the past few years.
And speaking of what people want, how would you describe the mood right now in Britain?
Oh, I think it's perturbed and confused. We're obviously, like everybody else, worried about the cost of heating our homes, the cost of food, inflation rising, the international situation in Ukraine. Of course, there's anxiety. All the more reason why you really want a political leader in place who has, as we say in England, some sang-froid, and some control and some consistency. So all this inconsistency and chaos, it's very debilitating. It's really quite upsetting for a lot of people, a lot of anxious people who are struggling to afford to continue to make ends meet at the moment, to afford to live.
And finally, as a leadership expert, someone who's written several books about it, what is your advice for the next British Prime Minister?
Well, I think it should be a fresh start. And I think collaboration, bring in the best people that you've got. Forget some of these petty rivalries. Leave your ego out of it if you can, as far as possible. And just appoint the best people that you've got and then delegate tasks to them and trust them to get on with it. I think that's what good leaders do. It's not really about the individual ego. It's about the team. It's about the collaborative effort in a complicated situation where you need everyone's abilities to do well. So I think it would make a big change in British politics, but we need to drop the ego and try and play as a team a bit more.
Well, let's hope whoever takes power next is listening. Stefan Stern, thank you so much for joining us for Perspective. That was Stefan Stern, a political commentator and the author of the books Myths of Management and How to Be a Better Leader.